Before this story begins, if you've ever been certain you would refuse an order to hurt someone, drop a like right now, before you find out if that's actually true. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper into who we really are. In 1961, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram placed an ad in a New Haven newspaper. He was looking for volunteers to participate in a study about memory and learning. The volunteers arrived at Yale University one at a time. Each was introduced to another participant, a friendly, middle-aged man named Mr. Wallace. They drew lots to decide roles. One would be the teacher, one the learner. The volunteer always became the teacher. Mr. Wallace was taken to a room, strapped into a chair, and electrodes were attached to his wrist. The teacher sat in front of a large machine in the next room, a shock generator, 30 switches in a row. The teacher's job was simple: read word pairs into a microphone. If the learner answered wrong, press a button. The button delivered an electric shock. 15 volts, 30, 45, all the way up to 450 volts. Above the final switch, a label: XXX, danger, severe shock. The experiment began. At 75 volts, a grunt from the next room. At 120 volts, this is really hurting. At 150 volts, get me out of here, I refuse to continue. At 270 volts, an agonized scream. At 300 volts, silence. The man in the next room stopped responding entirely. When the teacher hesitated, when they turned to the experimenter and said they wanted to stop, the experimenter said 4 things. Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on. Before running the experiment, Milgram had surveyed psychiatrists and psychologists. He asked, what percentage of people would go all the way to 450 volts? Their answer? 1 to 3%. The sadists, the outliers, the psychologically damaged ones. The real number was 65%. 65% of ordinary people, teachers, engineers, postal workers, pressed a button they believed was killing a man in the next room, because a man in a white lab coat told them to continue. Mr. Wallace was an actor. The shocks were fake. No one was hurt. But the people pressing the buttons didn't know that. They heard the screams, they heard the begging, they heard the silence. And many of them were visibly distressed, sweating, trembling, asking to stop. And 65% of them kept going anyway. The question Milgram spent the rest of his life answering was, why? His answer was a concept he called the agentic state. When a person enters a hierarchy, when they accept the authority of someone above them, something fundamental shifts in how they experience themselves. They stop functioning as a moral agent. They become an instrument, a means to someone else's end. Responsibility in their mind transfers upward. I'm just following orders. The experimenter told me to. It's not my decision to make. This is not cowardice. It is not stupidity. It is a fundamental feature of how human minds function inside social structures. In 1961, the same year Milgram ran his experiment, a man named Adolf Eichmann went on trial in Jerusalem. Eichmann had been one of the key architects of the Holocaust. He had organized the deportation of millions of people to death camps across Europe. The philosopher Hannah Arendt covered the trial for The New Yorker. She expected a monster. What she found was something far more disturbing. Eichmann was ordinary, bureaucratic, polite. He spoke in cliches. He referred to paperwork and procedure. He didn't hate Jewish people, he said. He had simply been doing his job, following orders. Arendt called what she witnessed the banality of evil. Evil, she argued, didn't require monsters. It required ordinary people, functioning inside systems, doing what they were told, not thinking. 10 years after Milgram, Philip Zimbardo ran a different experiment. He took 24 ordinary college students, mentally healthy, no criminal history, and randomly divided them into two groups. Half would be prisoners, half would be guards. They set up a mock prison in the basement of Stanford University's psychology department. Within 24 hours, the guards had begun humiliating the prisoners, forcing them to do pointless exercises, mocking them, taking away basic privileges. Within 3 days, one prisoner had a mental breakdown and had to be released. By day 6, Zimbardo shut the experiment down. The guards had become sadistic. The prisoners had become traumatized. No one had told the guards to act that way. No script, no instructions. The role alone was enough. The uniform, the power, the absence of accountability. What both experiments revealed was this: behavior is not primarily driven by character. It is driven by situation. Put good people inside the wrong system. Give them a role, a uniform, and an authority figure, and most of them will do things they would never have believed themselves capable of. Neuroscientists have since studied what actually happens in the brain during obedience. When we defer to authority, activity in the prefrontal cortex, the seat of moral reasoning, measurably decreases. The brain outsources its ethical processing. Someone else is in charge. Someone else will be responsible. This is why obedience feels comfortable. It feels safe. It feels like the right thing to do. The Milgram experiment has been replicated dozens of times across countries, cultures, and decades. The numbers shift slightly. The result does not. Here is the part that should make you pause. Before the experiment, every subject was asked if they thought they would comply. Almost none of them said yes. They were certain, completely certain, that they would stop, that they were the kind of person who would refuse. And then 65% of them didn't. The question is not, am I a good person? The question is, what system am I inside right now? Who is the authority figure in my life? What am I doing every day that I haven't examined because someone above me said it was fine? Research shows that awareness of the Milgram effect provides some protection. People who know about the experiment comply slightly less often. But slightly less is not immunity. The only thing that consistently reduces blind obedience is a prior commitment. Deciding, before you're in the room, before the pressure begins, what your line is, and that the line is not negotiable. The first act of resistance isn't in the moment of obedience. It's in the quiet moments before, when you decide, in advance, who you are. The instinct to obey isn't weakness, it is ancient. It kept tribes alive. But we don't live in that world anymore. We live in a world of corporations, governments, and algorithms that none of us fully understand. And all of us, in some way, obey. The Milgram experiment didn't reveal that humans are evil. It revealed something harder to sit with, that most of us, under the right conditions, will do almost anything. If the authority seems legitimate, if everyone else is doing it too. Who did you think of while watching this video? Write it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this changed how you think about yourself, leave a like. It takes 1 second. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper. Every week, one more story about who we really